Today, I'm peeling back the curtains on how I made my first 100 sales on my first ever Etsy store and how you can do exactly the same thing. I'm going to be walking through the steps that I followed to get my first ever Etsy print-on-demand business off the ground from 0 sales. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to show you exactly how long it took me to get to that magical 100 sale mark. So be sure to stick around for that as well. I'm Daniel, and I've been running 6-figure Etsy print-on-demand stores over the past years. In addition to that, I also have a master's degree in international business and have spent a lot of years of my career actually teaching at some of the biggest consulting firms and also tech companies around the world. But now my mission is simple. I want to take my love for Etsy and print on demand and my passion for teaching and basically show you how you can apply well thought out and tried and tested business strategies to your Etsy store to see more success. So with that, let's take a look at how I got my first ever 100 sales. So my Etsy journey actually started during COVID. I was sat in one of the many lockdowns that we had here in London in the United Kingdom, and quite frankly, I was bored. So I had a full-time job that I was lucky enough to be able to do from home, but other than that, I didn't have much of a social life. And I had a lot of time to think. And so I'd always wanted to start some form of side hustle. I wanted to have something that earned me some passive income on the side. But the thing is, when it came to this side hustle, I had 3 different criteria that I wanted this particular business idea to actually meet before I jumped into it. And those were that I firstly wanted it to be something that I was actually passionate about. Secondly, I didn't want it to be too time consuming, as I did still have my full-time job that I needed to focus on. And thirdly, I didn't want it to be a massive investment for me. And I spent ages researching this topic, as I'm sure you've been doing or have done in the past as well. I was watching YouTube videos, I was listening to podcasts, reading articles on the web, on Twitter, Instagram, you name it. I was looking at all those different resources, racking my brains, trying to find something. And eventually I actually stumbled upon print on demand. And print on demand is actually something that ticked those 3 boxes for me. Now you're probably wondering, what on earth is print on demand? Well, print on demand is basically a business model where you can sell custom designs on products like t-shirts, mugs, posters, you name it really. The world is your oyster when it comes to what kind of products you want to use. But here's the kicker. You don't have to invest in any of the inventory yourself. Instead, once someone buys a product from you, a third-party company prints your design onto that item and ships it directly to the customer. So it's a bit like opening like a virtual store per se, but you don't actually have to deal with any of the buying of the stock, the fulfilling of the stock, or also the delivering of the final product. That's all taken care of via this print-on-demand model. And as I said, I've been working in business for many years now, and basically when I started this as a side hustle, I did tell myself that I wanted to treat this as a business rather than a hobby per se, because I did want this to become a success. So I started off as any startup founder probably has in the past, and that is with the research side of things. And the first thing I started to think about was, what am I actually passionate about? And lots of topics came to mind. I'm passionate about quite a few things, but something which really stuck out was the topic of food. I love cooking, I love baking, I love eating food, so I thought that's a match made in heaven. So the next thing I did is I had this idea in my mind. I like food. That's something I'd be passionate about selling. Is I went to Etsy and I started looking on Etsy around this topic of food. I started doing research around what kind of food style designs they were selling on t-shirts or sweatshirts or other apparel. What else was selling out there? And what I quickly found is that I wasn't the first person on earth to think about selling food-themed items on Etsy. I'll tell you that. It was obviously already a very, very saturated area, which is very understandable. Who doesn't love food? So to stand a chance on Etsy in this food niche, I decided that what I would have to do is what we call niche down, which is essentially looking at a niche, such as the food niche, and actually narrowing down within that niche into a sub-niche. And so for this part, I actually turned away from Etsy and started looking on the outside world in the internet. So I was researching on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and basically what I was doing is I was just trying to get a little bit of inspiration for different designs and different ideas that were really, really popular in other niches outside of the food industry. And it wasn't even only on the internet that I was doing my research. You would find me walking down the street and awkwardly looking at people's t-shirts just to see what kind of designs they were wearing on them, just to see what was popular, what are people wearing out there. And it was after a while that I then somehow landed on a little golden nugget. I'd found a design that I enjoyed wearing myself, and I could see that other people were also very interested in it. And this specific design was very, very popular in different industries across the world. And what I found is that this specific design wasn't really to be found anywhere on Etsy specifically for the food niche. And so I thought, okay, how about I take this design, which is obviously already quite popular, and then merge it with the food niche. So that's exactly what I did. But listen, I'm not here to feed you a bunch of BS about how easy it is to find a winning product. All you have to do is follow my 3, 4, 5-step process. No, in reality, it's just not that simple, sadly. There's a lot of complexities around doing product research. You really need to find this fine line, this happy medium between a product category and a niche that is in high demand and has low or medium to low competition, somewhere where you could have somewhat of a competitive edge. And that's not that easy to find. But there also isn't a single way to do this research. And I actually think this is actually a good thing, because it means that you can decide on your own what works best for you in line with your preferences, what you're passionate about, and what you actually want to do with this business idea. What I am all about is sharing with you what has worked for me. I've used tried and tested business frameworks, strategies, tips and tricks that I've learned across the years of my experience in the consulting and teaching industry and brought them to life in my Etsy stores. It's then essentially up to you what of this information you would like to use when you go about building your own store successfully. And I'll be covering a lot more information around these different strategies and frameworks that I've learned throughout my career in future videos as well. So if you want to follow along with those, please feel free to describe below. So I had my idea, I had my concept, but now I wanted to focus specifically on my actual Etsy store. So let's take a step back for a second and imagine that you're walking down the street and you walk past this storefront, which has no branding, no logos, no products in the store windows either. What are the odds that you would go into that store to check out what they're selling? Probably not very high, right? Companies around the world pour millions of dollars into marketing and branding to make sure that their brand really aligns with the products that they're selling and also aligns with what their target audience is expecting from them. Now, these exact things are also things that you want to think about when you're actually going about designing and building up your Etsy store as well. Again, we want to treat it like a business. So, what did I want to do to make this happen? I wanted to take in consideration a couple of key things. I wanted to have a really eye-catching logo for my store. I wanted to have a cohesive banner that was in line with the different branding of my logo as well. And then I also wanted to flesh out my store with further information. So there's an announcements bar at the top in which you can provide additional information. And then lastly, to wrap things up, I also made sure to focus on the legal bit as well. So in your store, you'd want to set up your store policies, anything around the legalities of your store, such as, for example, your returns policy. I wasn't a designer, and I'm still not a designer. And I also didn't have millions of dollars to pour into the branding and the marketing of my store, as I'm sure you might not either. The great thing is that there's actually a lot of different resources out there on the internet that you can use for either free or at a very low cost and can really help you out with these design aspects. One software or one tool that I use a lot and did use in these beginning stages as well is Canva. If you haven't heard of Canva before, I really encourage you to go check it out. It's a really easy to use design tool that actually also has a lot of different templates that you can use yourself for inspiration as you build out the branding for your Etsy store. So I had my idea, I had my store built up on Etsy. Next up, I obviously needed something to sell. And so the first thing I did is I started focusing on my designs. Again, not a designer here, but as we talked about a second ago, I already had a very specific design idea from the research I had done in my previous research phase. And so I actually used Canva for many of my designs. So using that design inspiration that I'd found outside the food niche and the food niche itself, I essentially merged those together to come up with my own unique designs. So I had a couple of designs made in Canva. I was really happy with them, good to go. But obviously, as we spoke about earlier, I didn't have a bulk of t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats laying around, and I also didn't have the money to invest into equipment such as a printing machine or printing press, whatever you may want to call it. And so this is why I turned specifically to print on demand as a solution. And for my first ever store, I actually decided to partner with one of the bigger print on demand companies out there, and that is Printify. Now, I definitely encourage you to go and check out Printify, but also do your research into the other print on demand companies to see which one may be most suitable for what you are trying to achieve with your store. So the first step to making this magic happen was to integrate my Etsy store with a Printify account. So essentially, in short, what you need to do is head over to Printify, create a new Printify account, and then from within there, you want to integrate it with your existing Etsy store that you've already created. Once that's all set up, then you want to go into your Printify account and actually create new listings that then get automatically imported into your Etsy store for you. So once my first listings were live on my Etsy store, thanks to Printify, I really wanted to focus on making sure that my Etsy listings were easily discoverable to potential buyers. And this is where search engine optimization comes into play, or SEO for short. In a nutshell, Etsy has this really clever algorithm in place that helps potential buyers to find the products that they're actually looking for. So what I realized I needed to do is optimize my listings to make sure that they get picked up by the Etsy algorithm, so that they get shown to the most appropriate and relevant potential buyers out there. And hopefully, as a little additional bonus, on one of the first search pages as well. And so to do this, I zeroed in on 3 crucial elements of any listing: the title of the listing, the description of the listing, and the tags of the listing as well. These are really your SEO MVPs in Etsy, and they're really important to get nailed down, because those are the different elements that the Etsy algorithm will take into account when it determines how relevant a specific listing is to a potential buyer. Now, the other thing you definitely do not want to neglect when you go about optimizing your listings is your listing images. They're essentially your virtual storefront that go along with that beautiful branding that you've already created as part of creating your store on Etsy. So what I did is I made sure that each one of my listings had a really eye-catching title image, and then to support that, a lot of different additional product and brand related images that really aligned well with the rest of my store. So I now had my first listings up, and all of them wonderfully optimized as well. And as you can imagine, every single morning I was waking up and I was looking at my phone, immediately opening the Etsy app to see how many views had my products gotten, how many sales, did I get any sales at all? And let me tell you, in the beginning, it can be quite demoralizing. I was not getting many views, and I definitely wasn't getting any sales in the beginning few weeks. Something which I really had to force myself to do, and it can be really hard, is to simply be patient and to trust your own process. But then all of a sudden, a few weeks after those very first listings went live, I got my first ever sale. I was over the moon. I was so excited about it. But I knew that the work had not finished there. I knew that if I really wanted to scale this into something which would sustainably start earning me passive income as a side hustle, I would have to continue growing my store by adding more listings and further optimizing my store. And so that's exactly what I did. I continued for the first month or so to upload these 5 to 10 listings every single day. I actually decided to embed this Etsy print-on-demand business into my day-to-day routine. So again, instead of just sporadically doing an hour here or there, I actually routinely planned it into my schedule that every evening for X amount of hours, I would be spending time working on my store. And believe it or not, slowly but surely, my views of my products started to go up. More people started favoring my listings as well. And I started to get more sales over those coming weeks as well, which was just so exciting to see happen. So let's take a look at what my first months on Etsy actually looked like in terms of sales. So we're looking at the stats for my first ever Etsy store, and I've moved all the way back to the beginning when I first started it, which was actually on June 17th in 2021. And on this tab here, you can see the number of orders that I had in the first 3 months of selling on Etsy with this first store of mine. And you can see I had 239, but how did that actually break down? So in this first month of getting started, as you can see here, I started in June, obviously had 0 orders. By the end of that first month, I had 13 orders. And then that increased to 50 orders just in August alone, so 63 altogether. And then come September, I had 66 orders. So I had cracked that 100 orders, 100 sales mark about in the middle of September, which meant that it took me just over 2 months to crack those 100 sales. Again, what I really focused on here is optimizing my listings, growing my store, and making sure that I had a cohesive brand around everything that I was selling. You can also see here on the revenue side of things, obviously my revenue was growing on a monthly basis as well. So just under $500 in my first month, that then increasing to just over 2,000. And then going into September and also October, that started to steadily increase. Okay, key takeaways from today's video. First and foremost, find something that you're actually passionate about. Secondly, treat this Etsy side hustle a bit more like a business rather than a hobby. And thirdly, be patient. Do not lose hope. Stick with it. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about this stuff with you. If you're interested in following along and learning more strategies and top tips from the business world and how you can apply those to your Etsy store, please feel free to subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video.